Good morning, good morning. All right. LDS Stories of Faith and Courage. Right now we are on the next chapters. Avate Shinawa, the Big Wolf of Dark Canyon, by Albert R. Lyman. A gripping story of a killer wolf that cunningly matched his great strength and animal instinct against the tireless efforts of a man to trap him. The author of this story is one of the great writers of the pioneer period. He now makes his home in Blanding, Utah. Is this the same Lyman who was just earlier? Let's take a look. Well, that was Francis M. Lyman, Mission to the Indians by Edward Anderson. This is Albert R. Lyman. So different Lymans. Despite the sound of it, I am feeling a little better compared to yesterday. So I appreciate your patience. All right, so this one I think is less of an actual experience, more of a big fun story. So let's enjoy what Albert R. Lyman provides us. Dark Canyon, yawning and silent, reaches away to the west in a zigzagging course from the heart of Elk Mountains to the Colorado River. On every side of the mountain is San Juan County, Utah, and the county is 3 times more extensive than the state of Delaware. With a knowledge of its 10,000 miles of wild territory, Avante Sinawav, or King Dog, as the Paiutes call him, found no region more nicely suited than Dark Canyon to the murderous ways of his wolfhood. Around the mountain springs in its upper tributaries, he made his headquarters for the most of the year. But in the splendid isolation of its lower country, he celebrated his winter festivals. Avate came to Utah with a pack of wolves driven from the state of Colorado by a gang of exasperated cowpunchers in the year 1910. His chosen reservation in San Juan extended from the sagebrush prairie at Slickhorn, 30 miles south of the mountain, to Lower Indian Creek, far to the north of it. He never lingered long in one place, and visited various quarters of his domain once a month, unless it were in the severe winter seasons, when he avoided the deep snow of the higher country. From the beginning of his career as a full-grown wolf, he marked his path with remains of fat cattle wherever he went. He killed not only to appease his voracious appetite for flesh, but also to answer the wanton lust of wholesale destruction. He made the slaughter of cattle his consuming art, killing as many as 3 in one night. His name became dreadful, the cost of his operations startling. The cowmen of Peavine and Kigali offered a tempting sum for his scalp, and the wooden shoe outfit doubled the figure. Besides that, the Dark Canyon Company advertised a reward all its own, and the big wolf was coveted by every hunter and trapper hearing his ominous name. The first to stop on his trail with steel traps and animal scents was a man named Wolf, with 2 O's. He trapped coyotes, bobcats, and other easy game while he studied the habits of this king dog, following his tracks, scrutinizing the reeking carcasses and the deeply cut traces of their deaths, struggles, and listening to the hoarse howl echoing away in the distant breaks and coves of the mountains. Avate followed the trapper's tracks with all the friendly tolerance of one wolf for another. He seemed to have no fear of men. He made his kills almost within hearing of the camps, and advertised his absolute monarchy with a bantering voice on the midnight air. In the summer months, he held to a small circle near Kigali and Peavine Springs in the heart of the mountain, where he appeared from groves of oak underbrush without warning to spread terror among quiet cattle as they browsed the flowers or chewed their cud in the shade. From their mad stampede, he selected the choicest young animal, sheared its hamstrings in 2 with his scissor-like jaws, and claimed its flesh for his own. But while the king dog bantered Wolf from some dark retreat in the nearby timber, or from the safe places in the open or far away, and slaughtered his unblemished victims. Sorry. But while the king dog bantered, Wolf, the hunter, from some dark retreat in the nearby timber, or from safe places in the open far away, and slaughtered his unblemished victims in friendly proximity to the trapper's camp, he avoided the traps with unfailing instinct. Wolf played his part in the losing game till he began to believe Avate in league with the supernatural, and saddling his ponies, he departed from San Juan. In the wild stretches of Slickhorn among the green groves of the mountain, and on the north of it, in Dark Canyon and Indian Creek, the king dog marked his trail with fresh slaughter. A snarl of noisy coyotes followed ever after him, and though never daring to settle their sharp teeth in one of his victims till he had sampled it himself, they always licked the bones clean when he gave them the signal. Sometimes he kept them waiting for weeks at a time, and they refrained from his feast with servile obedience. The lure of a growing reward offered for his destruction brought to his trail a man named Bodish, who, with his son, began to ascertain just where the old wolf was in the habit of going, and how often he passed. While they followed studiously after him, he sniffed their tracks with equal sociability. "We'll get 'em," affirmed the old man when he saw the great track on their own. With the knowledge of the big wolf's chosen course, his preference for certain territory, and his bump of inquisitiveness for what they were doing, the Bodishes set their traps and placed their scents with eager hands. Avate was due to pass that way again in about 5 days, and at the end of that time, as young Bodish followed his trap line in the early morning, he found one set gone. It had been jerked violently from its place, and the heavy clog to which it was attached had hurled madly after it, making few but deeply cut marks where it struck the earth. The fury with which it had departed was written on the weeds, the bush, and the trees wherever it passed. It was the big wolf. The deep impressions of his great angry feet on the soft earth indicated the frenzy of his resolution to be free at all costs. Instead of holding to the track with all its distracted detours, young Bodish cut signs ahead, and crossing the track with sufficient frequency to make sure of its general course and going forward with all possible speed, when he cut back around the point of the trees and rocks, he discovered a big footprint, bounding free with neither dog nor trap, and making down the slope with long bounds. The foot that had been in the trap left a red stain. Turning back along the trail among the trees, Bodish discovered where the desperate king dog had jumped through the forks of a low tree, and when the heavy clog caught, he wrenched himself free by his splendid strength. Avate had seen a trap, not as a lifeless thing, but as a fiendish part of Bodish's track. Jumping treacherously from the dust and biting his foot with savage power, he would follow their track no more. And when the trappers learned of his displeasure towards them, they began to lose hope. "A trap-wise wolf knows more than a man," declared the elder Bodish, and packing their donkeys, they went back to Colorado. Again, the king dog became undisputed monarch of the rich range he wished to claim. He feasted on the fat of the land. He delighted to eat the daintiest morsels of the choicest cattle he could find. He made a bloody path from Slickhorn through Long Flat, across the mountain to Kigali, and into Dark Canyon, where he killed 3 heifers in one night. The foreman of the Dark Canyon Cattle Company, finding the steaming carcasses, declared with crisp words and strong feelings that they would drive the old thief to death or out of the country. "He's got all the trappers hooded, and it cost me more than all my hired help," swore the foreman in a rage. But the foreman found it impossible to take his men from their work long at a time, and he hired 2 Paiutes to spend their whole time on the trail of the elusive Avate, making it a point to go himself when he could, and to leave his whole crew to join the chase when their duties would permit. It was here that the king dog got his name, for to the red men of Elk Mountain he was Avate Shin Awav, or Ov, and their tradition vested him with origin and ancestry, which gave wonderful charm to the hunt, especially so when justified by promise of reward. The Paiute horseman's ability to race over rough country in a record time is a wonder to those who know it, and Posey and Scotty, who could get as many miles out of the cayuse as any member of their horse-killing tribe. It was stipulated in the contract that they mount themselves, and that their wages should be trebled if they got the wolf. But it took them a few hours to find the big track newly made across the country, and they took it up the avidity of bloodhounds after a hare. But the king dog chose his way far ahead of them, as if he had known all about the plot, and quickened his steps to be out of its reach. They held eagerly and pantingly after him all day, but darkness hid the track when they stopped without a glimpse of the gray figure. While they dozed on their meager blankets, with the cayuses browsing the leaves and weeds around them, they heard the banter of the old wolf's hoarse roar from the mountain side above, as if to assure them that he was the best of the spirits and ready for the game again the next day. In the gray dawn they pursued him, but from every clearing he crossed he glided under cover again before they appeared. The Paiutes brought their rawhide quirts with savage lash down on the reeking thighs of their mustangs, but Avate led on miles ahead, and night found them far from any camp in a cottonwood gulch of the winter range. The weary ponies could nibble the leaves of the greasewood, but Posey and Scotty found their waistbands painfully loose till they discovered a porcupine sleeping on a limb above them. Punching him out of the tree, they roasted his oily carcass on the red coals and ate freely of his flesh that night, and licked the bones clean the next morning. Thus handsomely stuffed with porcupine, there remained no reason for their returned base of supplies, and they followed the big track as soon as the gray dawn revealed it to their eager gaze. On they rode with lash and spur, peering always eagerly ahead for a glimpse of something gray with open mouth and long red tongue, but failing always to see it. The sun mounted high and sank in the west when they were 40 miles from camp, their pangs of hunger growing sharper with each mile. But Avante Shinawav, miles ahead of them, had taken time to kill a fat heifer and gourmandize with leisure, leaving a generous part for his starving pursuers. The Paiutes gourmandized too, taking the evening for the process and sinking wearily down by the carcass to doze when they were full. At break of day, they urged their jaded cayuses forward again, dotting big on certain corner to which they hoped to crowd the coveted game. They followed down what in the west is called a point, with deep gulches on each side and the forming of a junction ahead. Fearing the king dog would escape them on one side while they tracked him along the other, they separated, guarding the whole width of the point as they approached the junction, which they remembered as having a dizzy rim on 3 sides. When they saw by the big track that their prisoner had come back to escape them, only to be turned again by near approach of his relentless pursuers into the strong arms of his corral, their eagerness became a fever, and they whipped their dog-weary ponies forward, carrying their guns in their saddles before them. On the very end of the point, they caught a brief glimpse of the gray monarch as he gazed calmly at them, but before they had time to fire, he stepped down behind a little ledge, where he seemed to be crouching for a chance to break for the timber of the point behind them. Dismounting, the 2 Paiutes hurried forward, guns in hand, but Avate was not under the little ledge, and he was nowhere to be seen on the rock. He had followed a dizzy shelf along the brow of the cliff, leaped from the end of it to a perilous projection 10 feet below, and from there had gone by a desperate drop to the hillside at the base of the cliff. They crept to the edge and saw where he had alighted, and in a great service-berry bush from which he had gone, apparently unhurt, to hide in the bush or in the forest below. The Indians headed with their bony cayuses for Dark Canyon, And when they arrived, behold, the king dog was there, and well stuffed with fresh beef, all ready for the chase to go on, as soon as they got their fresh horses. The chase went forward again, for the foreman swore he could keep his expensive guest no longer. They pursued him with increasing fury to the end of the first week, and then to the end of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Yet the big wolf seemed as strong and hearty as ever. His appetite was excellent, his art of slaughter improved, and he was farther away than when the race began. He made his kills almost within hearing of the cowpunchers as they snored in their blankets, and he called to them with unfaltering banter while they poked their fire and cursed him cordially. And during the whole month he had been seen but once, when the Paiutes thought they had him cornered on the point. But now Posey and Scotty found themselves completely afoot. The foreman had no horses to mount them, and no men nor time to go on with the hunt. Again the king dog howled the exaltation of his monarchy from Slickhorn to Indian Creek, from the great reef of the Combwash to the dizzy walls of the Colorado. His career as wholesale butcher of choice young cattle had reached well into the years, and he had preserved his life and his vigorous wolfhood at a cost of $7,000 to $10,000 a year. His hoarse howl echoing up the broken mountainsides in the still night, or coming faintly from dark depths of tall timber, announced his invincible and bloodthirsty presence, making the cattlemen shrug their shoulders and curse in despair. From all quarters of his domain, the night winds carried the strong tones of his defiance above the saucy banter of his beggarly coyote following. Late in November, Warren Allen of Blanding, Utah, a town 35 miles east of Dark Canyon, answered the lure of the promised reward, and camped with his traps on the old wolf's favorite winter range. The king dog had followed his herds into the lower part of the canyon, known as Fable Valley, and though the old monarch made no long stops, his track crossed the valley at frequent and regular intervals. He made his entrance each time at the same place and always alone. Evidently he had forbidden the coyotes to use the use of his royal way, for they came down by paths of their own. The print of Avate's foot measured 4 inches across. Warren bent over in wonder and thought he caught coyotes and other furry creatures. He studied the old wolf's habits a full month without placing a trap in his path. During 3 whole days he did nothing but follow the wonderful track through the crooks and turns of its strange course. He carried his blankets on his back, stopped whenever night overtook him, trudging forward again with earthly dawn. But he could not traverse all parts of the royal path, for in some places the king dog had leaped from one dizzy rim to another, or slid down over steep smooth rock where no one but a daredevil would try follow. As Warren lay in his lonely blankets after his long walk, the hoarse howl echoed among the rugged canyon walls above him, a voice expressing the mighty lure of the real wild, where the big game is hunt and to be hunted. Then, from the high rocks where that echo started, an ominous screech owl mingled with it his piercing cry, after which he descended with silent wing to stand the trapper's hair with terror on end by suddenly repeating his splitting screech within 5 steps of the solitary bed. Avate's royal and exclusive highway entered the canyon from the west side. All coyotes kept their beggarly feet out of it, according to his Majesty's august orders, finding ways down among the rocks on each side, for they must gorge themselves on what his highness left, and he left them with greater part of every kill. Then they held loud carnival over each carcass when it fell to them, and they cursed and fought each other with echoing warmth. But the whole cowardly gang always waited for the king dog to give them the signal for starting by dining on it himself. Warren was delighted to find his own track, the imprint of the big wolf's foot. Though his wolfish highness had found Bodish a bad man to follow, in Warren he had apparently scented no danger. He was ready to chum with me in spite of Bodish, the Paiutes, and everybody else, Allen affirmed, and he went right on about his business after I was after I arrived, as if I were just to his taste. He killed 11 heifers in the canyon while I was there, and some of them within half a mile of my camp. About Christmas time, when cold winds moaned through the naked oaks, and the little stream and canyon crept along under the crust of ice, Warren set his traps for the king dog. The old monarch had come in at regular intervals from the west side during the month, springing each time from the same ledges and sliding down over the same smooth rocks. That highway looked like the best place for a set, and in the lone hunter placed 3 big traps, chained together, taking a full half day to arrange them, concealing the place with sand and color of the surrounding rock, and he spared no pains in obliterating all tracks, and added the essential lure of scent. When Avate came down the mountain again, he took another path. Wolf and Bodish had trapped in that valley, possibly in this same highway. From them the king dog had learned much. That chumming business was but part of his shrewd game. In all the windings of his chosen way, and his loud howl, and in the many carcasses where he wrote red testimony of his ferocity, he had yet reserved the secret of his self-preservation. His latest trapper felt strongly disposed to concede him sole right to the solitude, as other trappers had been compelled to do. When there came a fall of dry snow, and the cattle huddled near one set of the traps, Warren moved them for safety away, and the old wolf tracked him to the place and trod down the snow where they had been. It looked as if he said, "Move them traps out of my way, and I'll follow it again," said Warren. 3 days after that, he found where the old wolf had followed him in the snow to a coyote struggling in the trap, and there he had jumped from the shoe tracks as if they were hot. Across the canyon he had found them again and turned abruptly away. He wouldn't chum with me any more, declared the trapper, smiling, and my chances of getting him looked mighty slim. Soon after the close of the year, it became necessary for Allan to make a trip home, and he left most of the traps, including the 3 in the Royal Highway, and their set under the snow. He expected to return in a few days, but the business delayed him in Blanding while the winter progressed. Avate found the lone and dangerous track leading eastward up the canyon, and as the days passed, he saw no sign of its return. Neither could he sniff on the crisp winter wind the smell of fire, and no sound by day nor glimmer by night indicated the presence of man. He was alone. The keen instincts of his aggressive wolfhood assured him his tormentors had gone off, one after another, from pursuing after him. He had outwitted them, outrun them, and the white solitude echoed the exultant roar of his hard-fought supremacy. As the fall of more fluffy snow buried all traces of his last adversary, giving the wild world to him and his prey, he grew bold in the freedom of his dominion. He indulged his art of slaughter without fear and in triumph. He crossed the ghostly wilderness in the open or under cover as he pleased, holding his beggarly following away in disdain. The world was his, right and left. He forbade the servile parasites living in his splendid prowess from placing their feet on his royal pathway. A victorious lord of all creation, so far as he cared to claim it, he would hold to his chosen course, nor fear to tread where his instincts of his nature had led him. Down his old highway from the west side he came with august and sweeping stride, scattering the feathery snow as he sprang from rock to rock, till up from one of his landings jumped a great savage trap, gripping his left foot with silent fury. Whonk! Sorry. With indignant surprise, the king dog bolted like a flash, only to jerk from under the fluffy surface 2 other traps, a heavy wooden clog. It was no wisdom nor cunning of this desperate moment that snapped the 2 traps with sharp and empty click on the snow, instead of another of his frantic feet. From this evil place, some wolfish instinct called him toward the bottom of the canyon, and he struggled painfully down the mountainside, over the brush rocks, fighting here with an oak on which his chains had become entangled, and exerting himself there to dislodge the clog from between the 2 boulders. Then he caught his clinging irons around a young pine, the size of a man's neck, and in spite of his desperate pulling and jerking, it hung as if it were locked. He fought fiercely with that tangle of chain and traps and clog, going around the tree and back till he had worn a deep path through the snow and into the frozen earth. He settled his great dull teeth into the gummy bark of the tree, tearing it from the base of the trunk and scaring the juicy white wood beneath. And then, in a frenzy, he bit chips of wood from the tree and gnawed with trembling wrath to its very heart. When it fell, he severed the last tough fibers which held it, dragging his accursed tangle over its much mutilated stump, and headed again down the course of his royal way. Trouble beset him at every turn. 150 yards down the mountain, he jumped from a 9-foot ledge, but one of his traps caught on some heavy bush, allowing him but chain enough to reach the sloping hillside with 3 feet. His left front foot was suspended above his head, and unrelenting jaws of the trap. He tried in vain to jump back. The ledge was too high, his footing too nearly on edge, his unnatural burden too heavy. In his desperation on 3 feet, he turned round and round in the chains twisted up so short they held him erect on his hind feet. When after slow and painful exertion he reached the earth again with his free front foot, it was only to hang himself up again by the same motion of twisting. When he paused in his intense effort, his desperate cry echoed on the chilly wind, to be answered by the mocking back of his beggarly following, now growing desperate with hunger for the kills he failed to make. His mouth and lips were raw and bleeding from thrusting them ever against the hard, cold thing which held him, painting it over with many new coat of red. He whined, he growled, he uttered the most awful imprecation known to his fierce nature. In his writhing and struggling, he was too intense on escape to care that the dawn followed the dusk, and the dusk the dawn, and in one long fight with the greatest of all foes. And yet he fought on and wore out the strength of his powerful wolfhood, sinking ever lower with hunger and weariness, till he hung limply against the cold wall. His gaping mouth revealed a set of terrible teeth made dull with age, and his fiery eyes, frozen solid in their sockets, looked blankly at Alan when he had followed the royal way down the hill to where the king dog made his last fight. Whew. There you go. That's an interesting one. Well, I know now, especially during the 90s, there's a big push for reintroducing wolves to the West, and especially in Yellowstone. And there was a lot of very good and interesting things that occurred by reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone. They found that by introducing wolves, it actually changed the landscape. There's a kind of a short documentary about it, about how when they hunt, and they hunt near water sources, it would then keep the prey, instead of lingering there to munch delightedly at the vegetation near the water, they would have to apply themselves wearily and couldn't linger any longer. And that meant that the streams would have more vegetation grow near it, which meant that the shores of the little rivers in Yellowstone would actually have more habitation for other animals, and then that would also in turn mean that they could house more and different creatures, including beavers, which meant more meadows, which it just on and on it went. So it's a great little documentary. On the same time, when you're a pioneer out in the middle of these giant wastelands, trying to eke a life out, and you have a wolf killing so many cattle, yeah, that's a trouble with a capital T. T rhymes with P, and P stands for pool. And so in the end, I can understand exactly why the trapper was doing what he did. But it's a great tale. I somehow doubt its full truthfulness, but at the same time, if there's at least a grain of truth in it, the trouble that is caused by a king dog such as that would be immense. And so I'm grateful to have wolves back. I'm grateful for my ancestors who had to deal with these things, whereas thankfully I don't. My hunting comes from going down to the local store and hunting for some sort of a deal for my meat in a packing section. Not quite the same, now is it? On the other hand, it's a fascinating look into, again, not only the lifestyle. If anything, let's say that there is some truth to it. You look into the lifestyle of what pioneers had to deal with, and then the struggles they had to have, and yet you can see how they've kind of exalted the king wolf in this story, and how, they, instead of making it all about, the king wolf's survival, he's some grand monarch with how well he is able to evade prior hunters and trappers, and so we build up a grand story around this fierce foe of ours. It's fascinating the way that we give respect to our foes. I wonder if we give the same respect to our foes if they remain undefeated, or if we call them dastardly and evil. I wonder if it's just dependent on any author's personal desire and how to express themselves, or whether it's tends one way or the other. All right, let's get one more story in. First exploring expedition to southern Utah. Author is unknown. In the fall of 1849, President Brigham Young selected 50 men to go into southern Utah and explore the country for settlement. This is an account of their trip, written by one of the members of the party. Okay, so this sounds like it's more realistic. As the Latter-day Saints are increasing, and the old pioneers are fast passing away, a few items concerning their labors in exploring the valleys which we now inhabit may be of interest to youthful readers. In November 1849, so just a couple of years after they had arrived, the exploration company of 50 men was organized, with Parley P. Pratt as president, David Fulmer and W. W. Phelps as counselors, and John Brown as captain. With 12 wagons, each drawn either by 3 or 4 yoke of oxen, and 4 men to each wagon, also 1 carriage, we left where Salt Lake City now stands on the 23rd of November, traveling south to Utah Valley. We encountered a severe snowstorm, and the first night we crossed Dry Creek, American Fork, and Battle Creek, the last so named on account of some thieving Indians having located there to prey upon the Mormon cattle, and when the company had been sent out to punish them, a fight ensued in which a few Indians were killed. Oh, hence the name Battle Creek. Got it. We next came to the Provo River, where we found a small fort with a few families. One object in making a settlement at this place, so far from Salt Lake City, was that fish, with which the Provo abounded, might be obtained for food, an important consideration in those days when provisions were so scarce. The next stream reached was Spring Creek, and a little beyond was Hobble Creek. So I've been up Hobble Creek. So why do they name it Hobble Creek? So named from one of the brethren's having lost a pair of hobbles there sometime previous. Springville is now located upon this stream. Wait a minute. What is a hobble? I'm used to the idea of hobbling as if, you've broken your ankle and you're hobbling along. So hobble, H-O-B-B, hobbles, noun. What is a hobble? One or that which hobbles, one who by tenure is to maintain a hobby for military service, hence a soldier mounted on a hobby, a light horseman employed in reconnoitering, intercepting convoys, etc. A man employed in towing vessels by rope on the land or in a small boat with oars. Huh. Hobble. Hobbler. So it's either a soldier armed with light weapons who rides a small horse, or hobby. So it's a small horse. Okay. A small horse or pony. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Wow, I know. This is a location I've been. Our ward has uh, gone up there on like ward campouts and such, is up Hobble Creek. So, wow, this is cool. So, the next stream reached was Spring Creek, and a little beyond was Hobble Creek, so named from one of the brethren having lost a pair of hobbles or small ponies there some time previous. Springville is now located upon this stream. Next, we came to Spanish Fork, which received its name from a party of Spaniards having camped at the stream and crossed it while on their way to California many years previous. Uh, Petit Neat. Yeah, I'd probably call it Petite Neat. That's cool. Petite Neat. The next stream where Payson, is that still called that? Petite Neat? The next stream where Payson is now located was so called in honor of the Indian chief of that name, who was a good friend to the saints, and who claimed to have been warned in a dream that they were true friends of the Indians. Some Indians of his tribe now live in Thistle Valley and are most highly civilized members of their race in Utah. Summit Creek, or Santa Quin, the next stream crossed, was named in honor of an Indian by Brother B.F. Johnson. Entering Juab Valley, or as it is known as Yewa, another Indian name, the first water reached was Punjab Springs, Stewart's Ranch. The Indians were afraid of these springs as they believed that a big serpent lurked in the vicinity, which had devoured an Indian at some time in the past. They therefore avoided the camping here. Passing up Salt Creek Canyon, we found a bed of rock salt that appeared to have been dug many generations before. We also discovered hieroglyphic characters engraved on the hardest kind of volcanic rock that must have been done with very hard tools, which the existing race of Indians knew nothing about. Many similar engravings are to be found in the vicinity of Little Salt Lake in Iron County. Really? Crossing the summit into Sanpete, or Sandpitch Valley, the first waters were found some springs called by the Indians Pockwheats, named from W. Phelps, to whom they had given the spring, and whom they called Pockwheats. We journeyed past where Moroni and Fort Ephraim had since been built to the present site of Manti. Here we found a small company of saints who had just arrived there from Salt Lake to make a settlement at the request of the Lamanites, who had begun to believe that they were their friends. Manti was our outpost for some time. So you could follow this entire journey on a map. Like, if you wanted to pull up Google Maps, you could do all this. Perhaps some of the young people would like to know what kind of an instrument our odometer was and who invented it. When the pioneers of 1847 left winter quarters on the Missouri River, those who kept journals differed in their estimates of the number of miles traveled each day. So Brother William Clayton measured around the wagon wheel to learn the distance traveled by every revolution of it, fastened a hand saw on the side of the wagon, bore a hole in a spoke on the inside of the wheel, and inserted a peg in it projecting out far enough to strike the saw every time the wheel turned around. By keeping count of the number of times the peg struck the saw, it was an easy matter to compute the distance traveled. But Brother Appleton Harmon made an improvement upon this by constructing a cog wheel, which he attached to the wagon, with cogs sufficient to indicate a mile by every revolution. That was our Mormon odometer. And in fact, if you go to different visitor centers along the Mormon Trail, such as, there's a few. I think it might also be in the Salt Lake Mormon Visitor Center, not the Visitor Center, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Historical Museum. It's the one right across from the old genealogy library. And so, yeah, you'll also find that in places, just pretty much any visitor center along the way. I remember we had gone to winter quarters, as well as, was it in winter quarters? Or was it on, it was winter quarters, or it was in Council Bluffs, or there was also the one in Wyoming, which is,
I remember we went to the winter quarters
Well, yeah, we've got both, but which one had the odometer? There was in a couple of them.
I think it was I think it was the winter quarters because
Okay.
that was more recent one.
Instead of Council Bluffs, it was Winter Quarters. It was one of the two. And then there was Martin's Cove in Wyoming.
Did he?
So, anyways, yeah, you'll find it in the visitor centers there. And it's kind of something that's really stuck around in the history of the church, and it was quite useful because if you think about it, it was a good way to help other travelers later on and get a much more exact way of telling what was going on. So, we were joined at Manti by Brother Potter, Hambleton, and Lowry, and left that place for the south on the 1st of December. And let's see here, as that was as far south as any of our valleys had been explored, we might have secured some Indians as guides, but we preferred to be led by inspiration, as that never errs. Leaving Manti, we journeyed south to the Seaver River and up the valley past where Salina, Richfield, and Monroe have been built. The weather was very cold, and the thermometer at night at 0, with considerable snow on the ground. We found a spur of the mountain running down to the river, but we discovered a pass over it and entered a very nice little valley on the river. It being a pleasant evening, and there being plenty of wood for campfires, we sang songs and indulged in other amusements. Brother Pratt therefore called the place Merry Vale, not Mary's Vale as it's now called, as in a pleasant, merry, happy time, vale, and not merry as in a person's veil. I wish people would call it by its right name. Cute humor. We had been informed by the Indians and also by Barney Ward, the mountaineer, that there was a canyon on the Sevier that did not believe we could pass with our wagons. If we did, we would have to follow the Spanish Trail. When we were nearing the canyon, we had some horsemen on ahead to explore, and by the time the teams got to the mouth of the canyon, they had ascertained that we could not go up the canyon nor follow the Spanish Trail either. We had camped for the night with a prospect that we would have to return nearly 100 miles and take another route. I had been one of the explorers that day, and my mind had been much exercised about getting through. That night I dreamed of seeing a pass by which we could make our way into the Little Salt Lake Valley, as that was the course we wanted to take. When we awoke in the morning, I was relating my dream to brothers George Nebeker, David Fulmer, and William Brown. As we slept in the wagon and started, that Brother John Brown, who later Bishop of Pleasant Grove, and Brother Robert Campbell were with me in my dream. Just then, Brother John Brown came to our wagon and called me, stating that I was wanted to go and help find a pass through the mountains. The brethren with me immediately said, "We believe you'll find a way through." When I got ready and rode outside of the wagon corral, there were men whom I dreamed were with me. Brother Brown rode up to me and asked, "Brother B, which way shall we go?" I pointed and I said, "I saw a way through there last night." Then he said, "Lead out." I did so, and soon after we started, I told the brethren what I had seen in my dream. We explored a route for our wagons for 14 miles that day, through snow from 1 to 2 feet deep. Looking towards a hill nearby, I said, "That hill looks like the one that I saw I was on last night." I could see our way from it into Little Salt Lake Valley. We fastened our horses and climbed the hill, and could see, as I told them, down into the valley on the west. We got back to camp a little after dark and reported that we could get through. When we started with our teams, we encountered a severe snowstorm that piled up the snow from 3 to 5 feet deep in places, and we were 4 days in getting through, a distance of some 20 miles. Jeez Louise.
Can I have the tortilla?
That's about 5 miles a day, absolutely.
Probably the last time I'll be on this camera.
I'm sure.
See ya!
We'll see you, dear. When we got near the mouth of the canyon that we were traveling down, so that was 5 miles an entire day. Woof. When we got near the mouth of the canyon that we were traveling down, it seemed as though the ledges of the rocks came together. But there was just room for our wagons to pass into the valley. Brother Pratt called it Summer Gate. After passing Summer Gate into the Little Salt Lake Valley, we traveled south to a creek where Parowan now is built. There we left our ox teams with about half of the company to keep camp and explore the surrounding country. while Brother Pratt, with the balance of the party, started with pack animals with which we were provided on our trip further south. We traveled on by faith, not knowing whither, uh, and passed where Cedar City, Kanara, and Harmony have since been built. And then, over the rim of the basin, we found a change in the climate as we began to descend on the other side of the divide, from cold, snowy regions to spring weather, although it was the first day of January in 1850. We camped near where Tokerville is situated, and early in the morning we heard an Indian calling to us from the side of the mountain among the rocks out of the gunshot range. Brother D.B. Huntington, our Indian interpreter, called out in the Indian tongue for him to come down and talk. As we were friends to the red man, which he did in great haste, and with such expressions of friendship as Nuin Twig Tikaboo. Nuin Twig Tikaboo. As we inquired why the Indians were so shy, for he was the first we had seen since we had left Manti, he said that whenever they showed themselves to the Spaniards or emigrants, for some had passed through that country, they would be shot at, and they were afraid of white men and guns. And after talking a while and eating some breakfast, he left to spread the news that we were friends to the Indians. We journeyed down the Rio Virgin, past where Washington is now situated, the town. The Indians traveling with us all the time. As one group left us, another one would join us, though they were very shy. We were traveling near the Rio Virgin one day when the Indians saw a hawk sitting on a tree. They wished us to shoot it, but it was a long way off, and Brother Pratt thought we hadn't better shoot unless pretty sure of hitting, as it might lessen the Indians' respect for us. Brother M. Hambleton, however, said he would try if we would give him our faith. He shot, and the hawk fell, much to the surprise of the Indians. We traveled down the Virgin to the mouth of the Santa Clara Creek, where we found a large amount of ancient pottery of a very fine character. We also saw where Indians had raised corn and squashes the previous season. We went up the Santa Clara and camped for the night. Oh, that's an interesting thing. Like, if you do go to visitor centers down south, like, for example, I had taken a trip recently down to Cedar City, and just off of Cedar City is the Cedar Breaks Monument. And there in the visitor center, they have a wonderful spot that talks about the different Indians and the Paiutes that were down there. And it was fascinating to see that they had this kind of migratory route, because they would grow the beans and squash, but that wasn't always a guarantee because of the rain and the water. So they always had these different sources that they did their rounds on. So that way, if it was a great year for planting, great. They didn't have to do as much on the other stuff. Whereas if it was a terrible year for planting, they could still do gathering and hunting. It was really quite fascinating. Anyways, we went up the Santa Clara and camped for the night where St. George now stands. The Indians took great interest in Brother Huntington's talk to them, and seemed to be overflowing with friendship towards us. After talking some time with the Indians, there we sang a song that had a chorus, and after the first verse was sung, the Indians joined in the chorus, and kept time with the tune. We were surprised as well as themselves, for we never heard an Indian attempt to sing a tune before. There seemed to be a good spirit pervading the camp. It is said in the Scriptures that certain places were holy. I think this place certainly was. But little did we think that in 30 years there would be a temple built near this same camp, where great blessings would be conferred to the children of Joseph and Ephraim. From this point, we turned northward and arrived home on the first day of February. And so the spot they're talking about, I'm sure, is the St. George Temple. All right, I'm going to call it there. Next is A Stolen Woman. Ooh. So, again, there are a lot of these little stories about exploration and dealing with the Indians. And we'll see you, dear.
Other people online.
We'll see you, dear. So, you can see that each interaction varies according to the disposition of everyone involved. And I think that's a very good telling story of how things kind of work out. And I would hope that anyone and everyone, when faced in times of survival, would learn to be amiable. I know often we love to think of apocalyptic worlds, whether it's by zombies or by war or other things like that, and surviving afterwards, where what we do counts, or when we're just taken away from civilization. I've heard plenty of different theories and stories about that. A lot of times it's has to do with we want to be away from this hustle and bustle, and be doing things that actually matter. And that's why we love to dream up these different places where what we do actually makes a difference, where our survival is dependent on us. Despite the fact that if anything like that actually happened, most people would die. There's all sorts of things to go into on that. But we like the idea of, hey, I could do it. I could survive. I could make it through. And everything that I did would be a means of survival. Here, we actually have stories and retelling of things where that's exactly what it was. Every way that they would explore, every place that they would go, it had an influence. That trail that they blazed probably was what gave them the way to start colonizing south from the Great Salt Lake down through, because if you ever look at a map, there's with topography, like again, Google Maps, do the topography, you can see there's kind of this mountain range that goes right through the middle of Utah. And so them kind of exploring, and I-15 follows that route, and it goes north to south, and then it starts curving to the west, and then it follows all the way down to, I think all the way down to San Diego. And so it goes through St. George in this very southwest Utah, and then through the very tip of Nevada, through Las Vegas, and then down into California, down into the whole Los Angeles, San Diego area. So anyways, I suspect that what they had to go through and travel through was just following along that line. But it seems a bit different because Manti is kind of in the middle of Utah. So it seems like they had gone up into where Manti was. That's where they made their base of operations. And then went down through the center part of Utah, through Parowan and other things. So again, I'd have to actually follow a map, but I know the names of all these places. I've been through most of them in all my different crazy travels with my family on road trips. But it's that would be a good one to go through the story while looking at a map. But it's a beautiful place in all sorts of ways. And it's fascinating that they did all this venturing during winter. Wow. They were still coming out of a very cold point. We've imported enough Californians here. We've also imported their weather. We're having a nice, wonderful, warm winter. We're getting a bunch of rain and rainstorms, which is nice in the valley, and snow in the mountains. But yeah, as a kid, I remember having deep snow, a foot or two each year. And so here they are talking about like, oh, it's the end of November, and then down into December and January. Well, they were up in high mountains. They had 3 to 5 feet in different places. Wow. So, yeah, I hope for the return of those days of super deep snow, but I'll take what I get. I think the Lord provides to anyone who needs it, according to what's best for all his children. I hope this, again, is a look into the past, a joyful experience of what it was like to be among the pioneers and natives at the time, and may the Spirit of God be with you.